I always thought I knew my son Webster well. After all, I raised him alone after my husband Robert died in a car crash when Webster was only 11. But now, sitting in my quiet apartment and looking through old photos, I see I was wrong. I'm 75. I spent most of my life working as a financial advisor for First Merchant Bank of Tuscaloosa. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it gave me two things: a steady income and an understanding of how money works. I've seen people with big salaries go broke because of silly choices. And I've seen regular employees build a good fortune through hard work and patience. My apartment isn't fancy, but it's nice. It has 2 bedrooms and a cozy living room that looks out over the park. The walls have watercolor paintings by local artists and framed photos. Robert in his engineering helmet, little Webster on his bike, and me in my graduation gown when I got my finance degree. These are all signs of a life that was hard but worth living. When Robert died, he left us a life insurance policy. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough for me to take a year off work and finish my education. I put most of it in bonds and index funds. They weren't too risky, but they had steady gains. I also had the insurance money from the house, which was paid off the year before he died. I sold the house 5 years later when the real estate market went up and invested that money wisely. When Webster said he was going to marry Pearl, I worked extra hours to help them with the down payment on a house, a small but decent one in the Forest Lake area. I remember how proud my son looked when he got the keys. It was worth it. Daisy, their daughter, was born 2 years after the wedding. She was a joy to me, smart, curious, and with a smile like her grandfather's. I tried to be there for her without getting in the way. I came when they asked and helped when they needed it. Daisy spent weekends with me when she was little. I read books to her, taught her how to bake muffins, and we talked about the stars we saw from the balcony. Webster grew up to be ambitious. He did well in high school and college, but I always felt he was missing something, maybe compassion. He was always focused on material things: a new car, a promotion, a nicer neighborhood. Perla was perfect for him, just as driven, with perfect makeup and a cool smile. I never told my son what I thought of his choice. It was his life. She worked at a fancy furniture store, selling expensive sofas and beds to people who often couldn't afford them. She was good at convincing people they needed more than they did. When I retired last year, my finances were good. I had a pension from the bank, Social Security, investments I'd built up over the years, and an inheritance from Robert's sister, who died without children. I never thought I'd be so secure in my old age. It made me think, why do I need all this money? What am I going to do with it? Travel? My knees aren't what they used to be. Buy expensive things? I like my old furniture. Everything in my house has a story and meaning. That's when I thought about getting Webster and his family a new house. Their house in Forest Lake was too small. Daisy was growing up and needed more space. Plus, the neighborhood was getting run down. I didn't want my teenage granddaughter living there. I didn't tell anyone my plans. Not even my good friend Evelyn, who I usually told everything. This decision felt too personal to share. I started looking at the Tuscaloosa real estate market. Highland Park was too expensive. Northport seemed like a good option. Nice neighborhoods, good schools, close to downtown. I took notes, looked at listings, and even drove around on weekends, looking at streets where my son and his family could live. One morning I called the office of Marak Kincaid, the realtor Evelyn recommended. She's honest, my friend said. She won't sell you a house with problems. Good morning, Premier Real Estate, a cheerful voice answered. Can I speak to Marak? Kincaid, please? This is she. How can I help you? I explained that I was looking for a house for my son and his family, gave her a rough budget, and told her the neighborhoods I liked. How exciting! She sounded genuinely surprised.
It's
not every day parents buy houses for their grown children. That's very generous of you, Mrs. Quimby. We set up a meeting for the next day at her office. I wore my best pantsuit, the dark blue one I used to wear to important meetings. I wanted to look like a serious customer. Mara turned out to be an energetic woman in her 40s with bright red hair and a big smile. Her office was full of photos of happy families in front of their homes, clearly happy customers. So, Mrs. Quimby, she opened her laptop. Let's talk about exactly what you're looking for. We spent the next hour talking about the details, the size of the house, the number of bedrooms, the layout, the age of the house, and how far it was from Daisy's school. I didn't want the house to be too old, to avoid hidden problems. But I also didn't want a new house, because they're often built quickly and cheaply. I wanted a house they could live in for years, not just a nice box, but a place where my granddaughter would grow up and have good memories. Mara nodded, taking notes. I see good construction, nice neighborhood, good for the future. She looked up from the screen. Another important question. Does your son know about your plans? I shook my head. I wanted to surprise him.
Plus.
I didn't want Webster and Perla to influence my choice. They'd start asking for more than I could afford. Mara looked puzzled. I usually recommend that the people who will live in the house be involved in the selection. It's their place to live, after all. I understand, I said, but first I want to find a few good options. Then we'll go together, she agreed, but I could tell she didn't like the idea. Maybe she was worried about losing the sale of my son. Didn't like my choice. The next weekend Mara showed me 3 houses. The first was too dark. The tall trees around it blocked the sun. The second was on a busy street. I imagined Daisy crossing that road and my heart sank. The third was almost perfect, spacious, bright, with a beautiful backyard. But when we looked around the basement, I saw damp spots on the walls. Is that normal? I asked Mara. She pursed her lips. Let's just say it's not great. There might be a problem with the drainage. I shook my head. I didn't want my son to have to deal with repairs right after they moved in. The next week we toured 5 more houses. One of them on Magnolia Drive looked promising. It was a classic 2-story house with columns, a big kitchen, and a good layout. The backyard wasn't huge, but it was well maintained with a patio and barbecue area. It had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office for Webster, and a playroom Daisy could use as a studio. What do you think? Mara asked as we stood in the driveway, admiring the front of the house. I like it, I admitted, but I'd like to know more about the foundation, the roof, and the systems of the house. Of course, we'll have a full inspection before we buy. I always insist on it. That evening, I spent a long time with my financial spreadsheets. The house on Magnolia Drive was at the top of my budget. If I bought it, I'd have to change my retirement plans, less travel, more saving for everyday expenses. But wasn't that what I'd been saving for all these years, to give my family a better life? The next day I called Webster and invited him to lunch at the Southern Table. It wasn't a bad restaurant, with decent food and not too noisy. What's wrong, Mom? He asked, as soon as we sat down. You sounded mysterious on the phone. Do I need a reason to have lunch with my son? I smiled, but decided to get right to the point. Webster, I want to do something for you and your family. What is it? He seemed tense, always protective of his independence, even when he accepted my help. I want to buy you a house, a new house, bigger and in a better neighborhood. He stared at me like I'd said I was going to the moon. A house?
His voice
dropped to a whisper. Are you serious? Absolutely. I've already started looking. There's one on Magnolia Drive that seems perfect. 4 bedrooms, nice yard. Wait, he held up his hands. It's too much, Mom. We can't accept such a gift. But his eyes said otherwise. They were shining with excitement. You can and you will, I said firmly. I want to do it, Webster. I want to see. You live in a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I want Daisy to have her own room where she can do her projects. I want Perla to be able to have visitors without feeling crowded. But your money, your pension. I've done the math, I said. I'll have enough to live comfortably. He shook his head, but I could tell his resistance was just for show. I'll have to talk it over with Perla, of course. I nodded. In fact, I'd like you both to come with me to see the house on Magnolia Drive, maybe this weekend. He agreed, and we moved on to other topics. But I noticed how his gaze kept drifting off. He was already imagining himself as the owner of a new home. On Saturday, we met Mara at the house on Magnolia Drive. Perla couldn't hide her excitement as soon as we pulled up. My goodness, Webster, look at those columns and that lawn. She squeezed his hand. This is a whole other level. We walked slowly around the house. Perla oofed and acked over the granite countertops in the kitchen and the jacuzzi tub in the master bath. Webster nodded approvingly as he looked at the spacious garage in the office. What do you think? I asked when we were standing in the backyard. It's amazing, Winnie, Perla breathed out, calling me by my nickname for the first time in years. It's unbelievable. Webster was quieter, but I could see his eyes sparkling. Seriously, Mom, that's too generous. We don't deserve this. Yes, you do, I said. You're my family. Who else would I leave my money to? On the way home they made plans. What furniture to take from the old house, what to buy new, how to arrange the rooms. I listened to them with a smile. It had been a long time since I'd seen my son so happy. To my surprise, however, Webster called the next day to say that he and Perla wanted to look at a few more houses, just for comparison. The house on Magnolia Drive is gorgeous, he said. But since you're making such a generous gift, we want to be sure it's exactly what we need. I agreed, even though my gut told me it was the beginning of a slippery slope. But could I say no? After all, they were the ones who were going to live there. The next weekend turned into a house-hunting marathon. We toured 8 more properties. With each house, Webster and Perla's demands grew. What seemed like luxury yesterday was now just basic comfort. A house that was 20% more expensive than the original budget was now seen as barely acceptable. What about the Highland neighborhood? Perla asked as we sat in a coffee shop after another day of viewings. There are some great houses for sale. There, I sighed. Highland was the most expensive neighborhood in Tuscaloosa. Perla, I've already stretched my budget to the limit, but you sold some stock last year, didn't you? She smiled. Webster said it was a good deal. I looked at my son in surprise. I didn't remember sharing those details with him. Yes, I did, and most of the money is already budgeted for the house. Well, maybe we can increase it a little, Perla said in a sweet voice, like she was asking for more dessert for Daisy. Highland has such great schools. I felt irritation boiling up inside me, but I held it back. Instead, I decided to be brutally honest. Look, I said, looking at them both, I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart, but there are limits. I'm offering you a house that's several times better than where you live now, but I can't buy you a palace. Perla looked like I'd slapped her. Webster quickly tried to smooth things over. Mother, we understand, and we're very grateful, aren't we, Perla? She smiled tightly and nodded. Of course, Winnie. I'm sorry if I seemed ungrateful. The next day, Mara called with news. A house on Wisteria Lane had just come on the market. She said it was adorable and perfect for the Webster family. Can I show it to you today? She asked. Houses like this don't stay on the market long. We met at the house 2 hours later, me, Webster, Perla, and even Daisy, who'd been picked up from school early for the occasion. The house on Wisteria Lane was really impressive, bigger than the one on Magnolia Drive, with more elaborate details and a better location. It had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, an office, a game room, a spacious kitchen that opened to the family room, and a backyard with a pool. That's it, Perla whispered, as soon as we walked into the high-ceilinged hallway. Webster nodded, his eyes shining. He was already imagining how he would entertain clients here, how he would park his car in the circular driveway. Daisy was thrilled with the big room on the 2nd floor with the bay window. Grandma, I could put my telescope in here, she exclaimed. You should be able to see the stars perfectly from here. I smiled. Maybe it was all worth it to see my granddaughter so happy. How much? Webster asked Mara when we finished looking around. She gave a price that was 15% above my original budget. I felt my heart clench. It meant rethinking all my retirement plans. Mom? Webster turned to me. His eyes were a mix of greed and pleading, like a kid in front of a toy store window. I glanced at Daisy, who was still telling Perla how she would set up her room. Let's see what we can do, I said at last. That evening I sat with my financial spreadsheets, calculating everything again and again. If I sold some stock and moved some investments into cash, I could afford it, but it would mean a simpler life for me. No trips to the coast in the winter. And saving on the little things, would it be worth it? I looked at Robert's picture. What would he say? He'd probably tell me to take care of myself. But then I pictured Daisy's face when she saw the new room. Big, bright, with space for all. Her books and projects. Yes, I decided. It would be worth it. The home buying process took a month. Mara was very careful, insisting on a full inspection and checking all the paperwork and insurance information. I was grateful for her thoroughness, even though Webster kept rushing the process. Mom, we're wasting time. Someone else could buy the house. Better to lose a house than buy a problem, I replied, repeating something I'd told bank customers thousands of times. The inspection found a few minor problems. A leaky faucet, a bad outlet, a cracked tile on the porch. The sellers fixed these quickly. The main systems of the house, the foundation, roof, and electrical wiring were rated good. The house is in excellent condition for its age, the inspector, Mr. Patterson, assured me. But I always recommend maximum insurance, especially for homes of this size and age. I nodded. Of course, we'll get full insurance. That was a given. The day for signing the papers came on a clear April morning. We gathered in the notary's office. Me, Webster, Perla, and Mara. I signed paper after paper, transferring the rights to a house worth almost $1 million to my son. Wait, Webster said when we got to the insurance papers. It's too expensive. Basic insurance is enough. But Mr. Patterson recommended extra coverage, I said. It covers a lot more risks. Mom? Webster said quietly. It's an extra $5,000 a year. The house is in excellent condition. You heard yourself. Yeah, but we're not wasting money on insurance for problems that don't exist, he said. Basic is enough. I looked at Mara. She shrugged, saying it wasn't her decision. Perla avoided my gaze, staring at her perfect nails. Okay, I said, signing the document for basic insurance, but promising to think about getting more coverage. Later. Of course, Mom. He patted my hand, but I could see he was already thinking about his new house and planning a party for his co-workers. When all the papers were signed, Mara gave the keys to Webster. Congratulations on your new home, she said, smiling, and turned to me. You've given a wonderful gift to your family, Mrs. Quimby. I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and worry. It was the most expensive gift I'd ever given, and part of me wondered if I was making a mistake. But when Webster hugged me for the first time in years and whispered, "Thank you, Mom," all my doubts went away. I felt like I'd made the right choice. The move took 2 weeks. I helped as much as I could, packing fragile items, unpacking boxes, and making lists of what would go where in the new house. Perla was strangely distant. She spent a lot of time at the new house, planning furniture arrangements and picking out curtains, but didn't help much with packing up the old house. I can't wait until we finally move in, she said as Daisy and I put books into boxes. I've already ordered new furniture for the living room. Our old stuff just won't look right in a house like this. But Mom, our furniture is still good. Daisy objected, and Grandma has spent so much money on the house. Daisy, you're just a child. You don't understand, Perla said. A house like this has to have the right things in it. Otherwise, what will the guests think? Daisy looked at me for support, but I just shrugged. It was their house now, and they had the right to furnish it as they wished. Finally, all the boxes were moved, the furniture was arranged, and it was time for the housewarming party. Webster insisted on throwing a big party with a buffet, champagne, and lots of guests. Mom, this is a big event in our lives, he said. We have to make a big deal of it. I agreed, though I would have liked a smaller family gathering. The guest list grew to 50 people. Webster's co-workers, Perla's friends, some of Daisy's teachers, and even some old acquaintances from the bank. Webster ordered catering from Tuscaloosa's best restaurant, and Perla hired a florist to decorate the house. Don't worry about the cost, Mom, Webster said when I said I was worried. Perla and I are paying for everything. This is our home, and we want to start our new life here, right? The day of the party was warm and sunny, perfect weather for a party. I arrived early to help with the final preparations. The house looked amazing, with new furniture, fresh flowers in every room, and decorations. Daisy ran up to me as soon as I walked in. "Grandma, come on, I'll show you my room." Her room was just as she had dreamed, with a telescope by the window, bookshelves along the walls, and a small desk for studying. She showed me her new bed, a gift from her parents. "It's so nice here, Grandma, and it's all thanks to you," she said, hugging me. "I love you so much." "I love you too, sweetheart," I whispered, feeling tears in my eyes. The guests started arriving around 3 o'clock. Webster greeted them with a big smile, showing them around the house with the pride of a new owner. Perla, in her new dress, accepted compliments on her good taste in decorating. I was introduced to each guest with the words, "And this is my mother, Winifred. She gave us this house." This was followed by exclamations about my generosity. By 6 o'clock, the house was full of conversation and laughter. People were talking in groups in the living room, the kitchen, and the backyard. Waiters in white shirts were serving drinks and appetizers. I sat in the corner of the living room, watching with a strange sense of detachment. All these people were celebrating in the house I bought, but I felt like an outsider. Webster was too busy entertaining his boss to spend time with me. Perla flitted around, adjusting flowers and pillows, worried about making everything perfect. Only Daisy came up to me every so often, telling me about her friends' reactions to the new house and asking if I needed anything. Around 7 o'clock, Webster rang a glass, getting everyone's attention. "Friends, I'd like to make a toast." He raised his champagne glass. "To our new home and to my incredibly generous mother, Winifred Quimby, without whom none of this would be possible." Everyone turned to me, raising their glasses. I smiled, feeling awkward in the center of attention. "Thank you, Mom," Webster continued, looking at me. "You've always supported us, and this house is the most amazing gift we've ever received." "To Winifred," someone shouted, and everyone repeated, "To Winifred." After the toast, Lorraine, Webster's boss's wife, came over to me. "What an amazing gift you've given your son," she said. "Not many parents can afford that." "I've been lucky in life," I replied modestly, "and I wanted to share it with my family." "Do you live alone?" she asked, looking me over. "Yes, I have a small apartment not far from here." "Have you thought about moving in with your son? There'd probably be room for you in a house that big." I shook my head. "No, I value my independence. Besides, a young family needs its own space." "A wise decision," she nodded. "Although, of course, as you get older, it's harder to live alone." I wanted to say that I was doing fine on my own at 75. But we were interrupted by Webster, who had come to take Lorraine to her husband. The party went on. Gradually, the guests started to leave. By 10 o'clock, only Webster and Perla's closest friends were left, 2 couples they spent a lot of time with. I felt tired and decided it was time to go. "Webster," I said, walking over to my son, who was filling glasses in the kitchen, "I think I should go home. It's been wonderful, but I'm tired. Are you leaving already?" He looked at me with a slight surprise. "Stay a little longer." Brandon and Shelley were just talking about their trip to Europe. "No, honey, I really have to go," I kissed his cheek. "Tell your friends I enjoyed their company." "Okay," he said, sighing, "I'll walk you to the door." I said goodbye to Daisy, who was getting ready for bed, to Perla, who barely nodded, and to the rest of the guests. At the door, Webster gave me a hug. "Thank you again, Mom, for everything." "You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm glad you're happy in your new home." He helped me down the steps and walked me to my car. I was about to get in when I remembered the pie I'd brought to the party. "Oh, I forgot my baking dish in the kitchen." "Wait, I'll get it." "No need, Mom," he said, trying to stop me. "I'll bring it back tomorrow." No, it'll just take a minute. I need it for baking tomorrow." I walked back to the house and quietly went inside, not wanting to draw attention. There were voices coming from the kitchen, Webster, Perla, and their friends. I was almost to the kitchen door when I heard my name and stopped. "Winnie almost cried when they thanked her," Perla's voice said, slightly slurred. It was like she was giving us holy offerings. There was laughter. "Hey, easy." It was Webster, but there was no real disapproval in his voice. She gave us most of her savings after all. What else is she going to do with it? Perla snorted. It's not like she's going to a resort in Miami at her age. At least this way she see how it's spent while she's alive. More laughter. Weren't you afraid she'd want to live with you? A man asked. My mother-in-law keeps hinting at it. Oh, Winnie's too proud for that, Perla replied. She'd rather die than admit she needs help. Besides, we've made it clear that's not an option. How so? A woman asked curiously. You know, the usual excuses, Perla said. We need our own space. Daisy needs her own room to study in. Blah, blah, blah. In fact, the last thing we need is an old woman watching our every move in our own home. I froze, feeling the blood drain. From my face? Asterisk an old woman? Is that how they saw me? Can you believe she even tried to insist on some super expensive insurance? Webster continued. Like the house was going to fall apart tomorrow. I could barely talk her out of it.
That's smart, the man said. Why throw money away? Exactly, Webster exclaimed.
Now that money will be used for new patio furniture. Perla has already picked out a great set. I took a step back, not wanting to hear more, but my hand hit a vase on the wall. The vase wobbled, and I barely caught it in time, but I made enough noise to interrupt the conversation in the kitchen. Who's there? Webster shouted. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, trying to keep my composure. Sorry, I forgot. My baking dish, I said, pointing to the dish on the table. There was a heavy silence in the kitchen. Perla froze, her face pale. Webster looked guilty. The other two couples, Brandon and Shelley, and Kyle and Lindsay, shuffled awkwardly. Mom, Webster began, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't, I said calmly, though I was seething inside. I heard everything. You misunderstood, Perla said quickly. We were just joking, really. I looked her in the eye. It didn't sound very believable. I picked up my baking dish and turned to leave. Mom, wait. Webster grabbed my hand. Let's talk about ... About what, Webster? About how much you despise the old woman who bought you this house, or about how smart you were to turn down the insurance I recommended. He let go of my hand, his face darkening. You were eavesdropping. No, I came to get my dish and happened to hear the truth. Isn't that ironic? Perla set down her glass and walked over to us, her face suddenly hard. You know what, Winnie? Yes, we were telling the truth. You bought us this house, and we're grateful. But that doesn't give you the right to interfere in our lives or tell us how to live. Perla! Webster said, trying to stop her, but she waved him away. No, let her know. We're tired of your constant advice and judgmental looks. You bought us a house. Oh, that's great. Thank you, thank you. But it's our house now. And we're going to live in it the way we want. I stared at her, stunned, not so much by the words as by the anger with which they were spoken. I've never tried to control your life, I said quietly, but you wanted to. Perla shot back. Admit it. You hoped this gift would give you influence. That we would be eternally grateful and listen to your advice. That's enough, Webster interjected, but there was no real force in his voice. She turned to him. What? You've said the same thing yourself just yesterday. About how she's manipulating you through Daisy, how she's trying to tell us what to do with the house ... Webster looked caught between two fires. He looked at me, then at Perla, and I saw him make a decision. Mom, he sighed, maybe we do need some space. We just moved in, trying to get settled. Maybe you shouldn't come over for a few weeks. Without me?
I asked, finishing his sentence. Temporarily, he looked up.
Just a few weeks, Perla snorted. Come on, Webster, tell her the truth. She turned to me, her eyes shining with champagne. And anger. Thanks for the house, Winnie, really. Thanks a lot, but now we don't need a burden like you anymore. Perla, Webster exclaimed, but did nothing to stop her. I stood there holding my ceramic baking dish, feeling something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. It had been broken many times. No, it was the last thread connecting me to the illusion that my son, deep down, was still the boy I loved unconditionally. I see, I said at last. In that case, I won't bother you. I turned and walked toward the door. I stopped and added without turning around, I hope you'll be happy in this house. I really do. I walked out into the night, closing the door. Quietly behind me, no one followed me. No one tried to stop me, not even Webster. As I got into my car, I put the baking dish on the passenger seat and looked at the house. Big, beautiful, glowing with warmth, the house I had bought for my family. Giving away most of my savings, the house where I had just been called a burden. I started the car and slowly pulled out of the driveway. The tears I had held back in the kitchen were now flowing freely down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. There was no one to see my weakness. The drive to my apartment took 15 minutes. But it felt like an eternity. I parked, grabbed my dish, and walked up to the second floor. My apartment greeted me with silence and darkness. I turned on the hallway light and saw my reflection in the mirror, an older woman with red eyes and an expression of deep pain. A burden, I whispered. That's what I've become to my son. I walked to the living room and sat down, still holding the baking dish, not knowing where to put it in this suddenly foreign apartment. All my life, I had been proud of my strength, my independence. I'd raised my son alone, built a career, and provided for my old age. And now, at 75, I sat alone in an empty apartment, rejected by the only man I'd ever lived for. It was the longest night of my life. I didn't cry anymore. The tears dried up, leaving only emptiness. I sat in the chair until dawn, looking out the window and thinking about all the choices that had brought me to this moment. When the first light came into the room, I finally got up, took off my coat, and went to the bathroom. Looking at my tired face in the mirror, I promised myself that this would be the last time I let my son hurt me. The morning after the party, I woke up with a headache and a feeling that the world was upside down. I barely slept, replaying the events over and over in my head. Perla's words, Webster's silence, the realization that my family saw me only as a burden. I made myself some strong tea, my mother's cure for everything, and sat by the window, watching Tuscaloosa wake up. People were rushing to work, kids were waiting for the school bus, and the mailman was starting his route. It was a normal day. For everyone but me. The phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Daisy. My hand froze. What was I going to tell my granddaughter? The phone kept ringing until it went to voicemail. Then, a text message. Grandma, it's me, Daisy. I just wanted to tell you that I love you. And whatever happened yesterday, Mom and Dad won't tell me, but I know something happened. Just know that. I will always love you. The tears I've been holding back came. How could this 16-year-old girl be wiser and kinder than her parents? Instead of calling back, I sent her a text. I love you too, sweetheart. Always, don't worry about me. I'm fine. The next few days went by strangely. I forced myself to follow my normal routine. Breakfast, a walk in the park, reading, dinner. But it all felt meaningless. I checked my phone every few minutes, hoping for a call from Webster, but nothing came. On the third day, I got a call from Evelyn. Winnie, what's going on? I've been calling you for 2 days. I sighed. Evelyn knew me too well. Everything's fine. No, it's not. Webster and Perla ... They kicked me out of their lives. What? After you bought them a house? I told her everything. The party, the conversation I overheard, Perla's last words. That ungrateful ... Evelyn exclaimed. And Webster? How could he let her talk to you like that?
He didn't just let her, I said. He agreed with her.
Winnie. Darling, I'll be right there. No need, Evelyn. I can manage. Nonsense. I'll be there in 20 minutes with a bottle of wine and chocolate cake. Exactly 20 minutes later, she was at my door. She hugged me without saying a word, and that was exactly what I needed. We sat on the balcony, drinking wine and talking about life, kids, and disappointments. You know, Evelyn said, pouring herself a second glass, maybe it's for the best. How can losing a son be for the best? I asked. You didn't lose your son, Winnie. You just saw him for who he really is. Now you can stop wasting your energy on people who don't appreciate you and start living for yourself. Why not? My father started learning Spanish at 80, and 3 years later he was fluent. Age is just a number. I shook my head, but Evelyn was right. All my life I'd put Webster first. Maybe it was time to think about myself. The next day, I decided to go for a longer walk. The sun was warm, and I headed for Riverwalk Park, a small park on the Black Warrior River, 10 minutes from my house. I was sitting on a bench when I noticed an elderly man walking toward me with a cane. Something about him looked familiar. "Mrs. Quimby?" He stopped in front of me. "Winifred Quimby?" I looked at him and recognized Orville Pye, the lawyer who had helped me with Robert's paperwork. "Mr. Pye," I said, smiling. "What a surprise." "Call me Orville, please. You and I are old enough for that." He grinned. "May I sit down?" I moved over. Orville sat down, placing his cane beside him. "I live not far from here," he said. "I moved in after Margaret died. The house got too big." I remembered that his wife had died a few years ago. "I'm sorry for your loss." "It's been 5 years," he sighed. "But thank you. How are you?" "How's Webster?" I tensed. "He's fine." "He just moved into a new house." "That's great." Orville nodded. "And you? You look—" "I'm sorry to be blunt, but you look upset." Something about his eyes made me open up. To be honest, it hasn't been the best time of my life. I told him everything, and he listened without interrupting. 1 year later. "That's unfortunate," he said when I was done, "but not uncommon." I've seen the room buzzed with quiet admiration and laughter. On the walls hung framed watercolors, familiar and full of soul, scenes of local parks, stormy clouds over the Black Warrior River, a child's hand reaching for a dragonfly. I stood quietly in the corner of the gallery, a glass of sweet tea in my hand, next to a small plaque. "Paintings by Winifred Quimby, a life rediscovered." Daisy stood beside me, 17 now, glowing with confidence. She had insisted on organizing the gallery night for me. "You finally started painting again, Grandma," she had said months ago. "People should see it." Webster and Perla were not here. After that night, we didn't speak. Daisy visited me often on her own, but she stopped telling her parents when she came. "They don't understand," she once whispered, "but I do." Evelyn joined us, a proud smile on her face. "The turnout's amazing. I always knew you had this in you." "Thank you," I said softly, watching someone buy one of my landscapes. "I didn't know I had it in me until I stopped giving everything away." She squeezed my arm. "You didn't lose your son, Winifred. You found yourself." I turned to her, smiling. "Yes, and that's the best investment I've ever made."